One of the most eagerly awaited video games finally goes on sale.
Preparing to rewrite retail history.
Video game is expected to have bigger first-day revenues than any movie has ever had on opening day at the box office.
Biggest retail launch in entertainment history.
These two sections are going to be PS3, and you're walking through these aisles, and you're seeing all the PS3. This is all going to be Xbox.
Oh my god, dude. Oh my god. On 2 discs. On 2 discs.
There you have it. That was
It's
Final
too
Fantasy
big.
VII.
Check this out. The entire room is literally just a game room.
In today's increasingly digital landscape, it's very easy to overlook the real-world value that physical games and media as a whole bring to the table. From a company's perspective, going digital and selling goods and services digitally means your company's more effective, more efficient, you're saving costs on producing physical items, and you're quicker at distributing your product. But all of this quick and easy convenience for the consumer comes at a cost for both the consumer and the company. When it comes down to the video game industry and experience of playing video games, going digital might mean that you're actually experiencing less compared to someone that buys physical media. A recent study found that interacting with a physical product, looking at the case, interacting with the manual, checking out the disc, popping the disc in the system, just talking to friends about what you bought. All of those factors actually increase and activate systems in your brain that give you more access to the attachment of that product. They allow you to recall events regarding the physical product more, and you actually become more enthralled with that experience versus using something digitally on a screen. It even increases your satisfaction with the experience itself. All of these points make a bigger picture that physically interacting with your media increases your memory of it, and it creates a bond with said product. But at the end of the day, we now live in the digital age, and all of this gets suppressed because the next wave of digital innovation is selling your products online. It's a fact that digital sales are rising. If you take a look at Circana's recent report on video game engagement and spending, it looks like 60% of gamers worldwide are only buying about 1 to 2 games a year. And the majority of those are actually digital sales. But for me, this study and the previous study brings up an even bigger question. Are fans becoming less attached and engaged to products that they buy digitally? From all these recent reports and studies that I've found that are going to be mentioned in this video, I've found that the answer is yes. Especially when it comes to platforms that do not promote physical media like Xbox or PC. The point that I want to make with this video is that physical media and especially video games matter in general for both consumers and companies. Physical ownership and media in general celebrates and improves the experience for the consumer that eventually leads to more long-term success for the franchise and the business that owns it. Physical ownership ultimately creates deeper connections for the consumer. It creates a higher spending threshold for said consumer. It creates and fosters a culture around the world, and it differentiates depending on where you live. And it ultimately creates a fan base that is going to come back to purchase and play more. That is what we are going to discuss in this video today. If you don't know me, I go by Critical Fish online, and I tend to discuss the latest and greatest in the video game industry. I'm a personal fan of curating my own collection of games and media, and I also love to dive deep into new stories and studies that are found across the video game industry. The first section I'm talking about is the emotional connection and ownership to physical games. If you've ever seen somebody else's video game collection before, you know for a fact they can list off their favorite games, their favorite memories, amazing physical products or rare items that they own, and you can tell that they're very proud of it. This emotional connection and ownership of the experience is a very important reason as to why physical media, especially in the video games industry, is extremely important to retain and build new fans of your franchise. When a game company is willing to release their game physically, you as the consumer are getting access to their world. Like I said before, you can check out the disc, you can check out the manual, you can read all about what they want to tell you about the game, and it becomes part of your experience with it. And now that I've beat it, played it, and enjoyed it, it sits proudly on my shelf where I like to showcase my favorite games. It indirectly makes me appreciate the studio behind this game, Asobi Games, and the publisher of it, which is PlayStation Studios. And it also makes me enjoy the platform that I played it on, the PlayStation 5. This is just one example of a physical media purchase that made me appreciate the game because I own it physically and I'm able to see it every now and then when I check out my video game collection. For others, it might mean purchasing entire systems or waves of video games at a time, like going back to the past with retro collecting and going back to buy a GameCube with all of its physical games. It could also mean buying a collector's edition of a new game that's coming out because you played the previous game and you want to experience the next one and own a piece of that franchise in your house because you love it so much. Thankfully for companies, they can create all types of merchandise, special editions, collector's editions, so that you actually do spend that money and they can profit while also continuing to fund and fuel that franchise as a result. Speaking of spending and buying a lot of new items, the next section I want to talk about is higher spending and brand loyalty. When players feel a sense of ownership and respect, they actually are willing to spend more. Hybrid consumers who purchase physical games and digital games spend approximately 33% more than your average consumer who just picks one or the other. And that's because avenues have opened up for you to spend your money. So you could go to the store, see a good deal on a game and buy it, or you can go on the storefront online and purchase a deal just like that. But at the end of the day, if you're doing both, you're going to be playing more and spending more. I'm sure if you're a fan of a specific series, you've probably been the quote-unquote victim of spending a lot more than you ever thought you would on something that you really enjoy. For instance, let's talk about Destiny fans, okay? Destiny is a digital ecosystem for the most part, but if you're hooked into the world of Destiny, you're most likely going to enjoy it and be willing to spend money on every subsequent DLC that comes out for that game. And that can either be a good thing or a bad thing depending on which side you're on. For the most part though, if you're a consumer and you're enjoying what you're spending your money on, then it's a win. And if you're a business producing more of that product and gaining sales from it, that's a win. For me personally, my favorite thing ever when it comes to video games is Final Fantasy VII. So I am guilty of buying multiple copies of the game or deluxe editions of the game or even some merchandise here and there. This ultimately leads to me being in a higher threshold for being a higher spender for Square Enix. You know, if they continue to make Final Fantasy VII products and services, I'm gonna buy them. Now, knowing me, I'm still very critical of what I purchase and play, so I'll be very self-aware during this process, but it just happens to be that I'm going to be spending more money because I liked something, especially because I owned it physically. In this next section, I want to talk about the collector culture. When you're buying physical media for a specific video game, franchise, or system, you're also kind of subconsciously buying into the franchise ecosystem as well. If you take a look at sealed, retro, graded collector's items that are highly sought after because the franchise has been extremely popular over time, you would definitely see that there is a strong appeal for fans and that the items are extremely expensive to obtain. That is all coming from a fan perspective. Now, how do companies benefit from this as a result? Well, publishers tend to love doing remasters and remakes of some of fans' favorite IPs. You can look at Metal Gear Solid or Silent Hill or Resident Evil as kind of recent examples of this. They like to sell these versions of games digitally and physically, and usually the physical editions of the games have different bonuses. You can get sealed limited editions of games. You can buy the statues of the characters from the games. You can buy all the merchandise like their clothing or their shoes. And that is an additional way that companies will use the fans to make more money as a result, outside of just the video game itself. Naturally, these types of releases generate excitement and engagement with the fans. You're going to see a lot of collectors come out and do unboxings or reviews or share their thoughts on certain games, and that in and of itself generates interest and engagement with the specific game, franchise, or company. When culture is built for a specific game or franchise, that is when it can become sustainable and grow for the long term. There's entire businesses that exist with this assumption in mind, or even YouTube channels that specify on one specific game franchise to cover for years. And it's crazy, but it makes sense because if the fans love what a company can produce, then they're willing to talk about it, share it, showcase it, and purchase more from these companies. These super fans are the ones that are ultimately buying a lot of the physical media and promoting that as a means to showcase their love for it. The fourth section of this video is going to be talking about the regional differences as well as the platform differences and how that creates different environments for consumer behavior. Physical media thrives differently worldwide. If you can look at the US and UK sales stats for video games, whether they're digital or physical, the trend is clearly that digital games are taking over for that sake of convenience. And it's about 60 to 70% of total sales being digital for those regions. If you take a look at Japan though, for instance, it's a split, and half of their sales, being 50%, are still physical. People in the US might want more convenience or on-the-go accessibility, while people in Japan might have dedicated slots of time to put the cartridges into their Switch or put the discs into their PlayStation, and that kind of creates a certain environment and purchase style for that region. Now, when it comes to platforms, there's definitely a difference in terms of digital versus physical support. If you look at something like the PlayStation 5, you're going to see a disk drive right on that system, which means that as the consumer, you have the ability to purchase through your storefront, or you can go to the store and buy a disc to slot into the system. That gives you flexibility, but it also gives you choice in terms of how you build your game collection. If you look at something like the Xbox Series S though, that does not have a disk drive, and you will only be able to buy or rent your games digitally. And as the studies show, there is still a need for physical media when it comes to PlayStation. It looks like about 30% or more of those physical sales exist in 2025. And it's just going to keep happening with those people that like the physical media. But when it comes to Xbox, they don't give the consumer a choice. They are feeding into the ecosystem of making you a digital consumer / renter. It's the same deal with PC. There is pretty much no more PC discs that you will need to use going forward because a storefront like Steam exists. And while it does give you access to good deals digitally, you'll never own a game physically through a PC. Overall, these regional and platform differences create a lifestyle and a consumer behavior choice to be made, and it's different across the world. But in my eyes, I see the physical collector who buys discs, who buys physical media, and is very intentional with what they play as someone who is deeply or just more engaged with the game, series, or company in general. And I think that is a positive for the businesses. And going off of that point, this final section is going to be talking about the core fans and the long-term profitability of certain franchises for companies. Now, like I mentioned before, that recent report from Circana shows that only about 60% of gamers are buying 1 to 2 games a year. That point alone shows that companies should be really hyper-focused on the remaining portion of players that are there day one, that are there to support the digital edition or the physical edition or the limited edition or all the merchandise that they provide right at launch. There should be a lot more respect for the people that are there day one. The hyper fans that will purchase all your DLC, that will check out your subscription service, that will go through the ups and downs of your company. These are the people that companies need to respect and cater towards if they want to make more money and if they want their franchises to succeed. I think that relationship between consumer and creator needs to be respected. And I think if companies do that going forward, I can think of a few examples off the top of my head, success will come. Overall, I think I've made a decent argument for the idea that a physical game consumer is going to be more engaged in your product or your service over time. I believe that getting physical media and having physical games actually makes video games a more rich and engaging experience. And while that's great news for consumers, that also will benefit companies. And I'm sure they would love to hear that I'm willing to spend more money on their products if they produce good franchises and represent it in physical form. It hurts to see companies like Microsoft committing to the all digital route where you're not going to be able to buy physical representations of your favorite games, whether that's the actual game or the merchandise. It just is kind of sad to see that lack of confidence and understanding in your fans. Other companies are still doing that approach, but to a much lesser extent. If you look at PlayStation, they're still offering disc drives. Nintendo Switch 2 has the same physical cartridge that a Switch 1 would have, meaning that they are reinforcing the idea that you can still buy physical Switch games whenever you want for the next 10 years. I think an all digital library is pretty scary in some ways, and the idea that you should be buying digital games is not great in my eyes, especially if I want to become a fan of your series. With all that being said, I really hope you consider your approach to digital or physical media collecting, and I hope that as a result of that, companies, especially game companies, will recognize how important it is to have physical media for their products. All of the sources that I've used in this video will be linked in the description below. I want to hear your thoughts on physical versus digital collecting. Who benefits more, consumers or creators? And what do you think of the video in general? Did I do a good job of explaining why physical media is important? Let me know. If you want to stay tuned for more videos on Critical Fish, hit the subscribe button, give the video a like, and please give me a comment. I will definitely check it out and respond to you, whether it's rage bait or not.